Hi, I'm Simon Hurley, and I'm Ranger's newest signature designer here at Scrapbook.com, and I'm super excited to share my new Simon Hurley Create line with you, which consists of paper, inks, lots of different stamps, and stencils. So let's get started. In this lesson, I'm going to create a variety of different ink-blended backgrounds and share some of my favorite colors to use for ink blending to create some really awesome scenes on your card making projects. Now for my ink blending today, I'm going to be using the Simon Hurley Create ink pads. Now we formulated these really specially to do a great job with ink blending, and you'll see in today's lessons, if you get any harsh marks, they blend out really nicely and create beautiful blends between all of the different colors. So these are a water-based dye ink, and they have that felt-based pad. So it's not going to be too squishy, it's going to be great for stamping and applying ink, and they're really juicy ink pads for when you want to apply lots of that color. So I'm going to get started here with a piece of my stark white cardstock. Now this comes in 8.5 by 11, but I've cut it down to card-based size, which is 4 1/4 inches by 5.5. So this is going to be perfect for a card front once we're done blending. Then I'm going to grab my mini ink blending tool. These come in a pack of 2, and I love these for applying really nice coats of ink down. So to do an ink blended background, I start out with my first color here, and I'm going to go in with Bee Sting, which is a really nice vibrant red color. I like to load up the sponge with quite a bit of ink, and then when I'm doing my ink blended backgrounds, to make sure there are no harsh marks, I like to tap it off a couple times just to get any excess ink off that blending tool, and then I'll go right onto the surface of the cardstock. You can see I'm just slowly blending. I start off the edge of the cardstock, tap off a couple times, and then blend that color on, and you can see that super vibrant color coming onto the cardstock here. So if you get any harsh marks on your edges here, later on we'll cover that up with other colors of ink. So when I'm blending backgrounds, I like to make sure that I keep the colors in 3 spots on the background. And this is going to make sure it's super nice and cohesive and that all the color carries throughout. So I'll apply Bee Sting over on this side, and then I'll put a little bit here on the bottom as well. Moving on to my second color, I'm going to use Slippery When Wet. And I really love this yellow color mixed along with the red because it creates an awesome new color right in between. So I'm going to apply some ink onto the blending tool, tap it off a few times, and then once I blend this onto the surface here, you can see that in between that red and yellow, you get a really nice kind of vibrant orange color there. Really love how that turns out. So I tend to use these colors together quite a bit. Now, as I add the color on, I like to make them kind of touch in some areas, and that way this will provide a nice little area where we can put our third color in there. So I'll move over to another section of the background and continue to blend. And the more heavy-handed you are, the more ink is going to go on the surface. So if you want a really nice, bold background, you can keep applying more layers of ink on top to get that color really vibrant and saturated. Now, if I'm going to go into a third color, I can easily take the blending foam right off of the tool, and I can replace it. These come in replacement packs as well, so you can have a couple tool handles and then a couple replacement foams for all your different colors. So I'm going to go into Clear Skies here, and this is a nice blue color. So we're kind of going with a primary color scheme, and they're going to work really nicely together. So I'll take a little bit of blue, and I'll apply it in here on the corner. And where the blue meets the red, you're going to get that nice purple color, and then when it hits the Slippery When Wet here, you're going to get a nice green. And then I'll go into the other areas where there's a little bit more room for that color. Then if you're starting in the center here, I like to make sure to tap off my color, and then you can apply color right in the center, and there will be less harsh marks. And to fill out the background, if there's any other room, I'll go back in with the other colors. So going back in with Bee Sting here, and I'll add a little bit more of that color into the background to kind of fill it out there and make sure there's no white space left. So once I'm done blending, we have this really nice background. It's super vibrant and saturated with colors, and I love using Bee Sting, Slippery When Wet, and Clear Skies together because you get some really awesome new colors where each color meets. So if anybody has any questions about color theory, I always love to start with these 3 colors when creating my backgrounds, and it inspires lots more colors for the future. Now let's talk about finishing off the edges of a background. Now for this, I love to go in with my Gur color. This is a nice brown inspired by my dog here. I'm going to go into this color, apply a little bit of ink on my blending tool, and then as I'm blending this, instead of going right onto the surface of my cardstock, I'll lift my blending tool off the surface. I'll kind of start off the edge there, and then I'll just tap it right onto the edge of the cardstock. So I'm not fully going in with this color, just touching it right to the edge. And this is going to add a little bit of darker color around there, and really create a more finished edge, especially in those lighter colors where that yellow is. Now when you set this against your white piece of cardstock here with that gur along the edge blended there, it creates a really awesome look, and it really contrasts between that white, which creates a great finished edge for your card. Now to add a little bit more texture and interest as I'm creating backgrounds, I like to go in with some texture paste as well. I'm going to use the opaque matte texture paste, and you'll see why this creates a really awesome effect when you're doing ink blended backgrounds. So I'll open this up. I'm going to go in with my backsplash stencil here, and I'm going to create a really awesome background with the texture paste. So I'll go in with a palette knife, lift off a little bit of that texture paste, and when I'm applying it over top, you could definitely go through the whole stencil and get that design fully blended over, but all I'm going to do is grab a little bit of that texture paste and just kind of apply it randomly throughout the background. This is going to create a really awesome variated look, and you could totally fill the whole thing if you wanted a more clean look. So once I'm done applying the texture paste, I can easily take the excess and put it right back into the jar for later use, and then I'll seal that off. Then I'll lift this right off the stencil. You can see that really awesome textured background that we've created there. And then when I'm working with texture paste, I like to make sure that it gets cleaned off the stencil right away. So I'll go in here with a baby wipe and clean this off really easily, and that way it's not going to dry on our stencil. So you want to keep your tools nice and clean for later use. So once that's all nice and dry, it should be really nice and firm, and it'll kind of feel almost like the texture of your paper. And that's exactly what we want when we're using that opaque texture paste. So then I'm going to go in with my inks again. Here I'll start off with Bee Sting. Going to apply a little color there, and then I'll tap it off like we have been doing. And then I'm going to go right onto the card. And you can see here that when we're using this texture paste, it's going to apply ink right on top of there as well. So it's almost like a raised paper surface, which is really awesome. Instead of resisting it, it just takes that ink right there and applies it right over top of that texture. So it creates a really awesome layer to your card. So once I'm finished with that, you can see how cool that looks. I just love that look with the texture paste on there. Now I really love this opaque matte texture paste from Ranger. Not all texture pastes are created equally, and this one's going to actually grab that color and keep it right on top of the surface. Other texture pastes might take your color, but then if you rub your finger over top, it's going to kind of remove the color from the surface and get your hands all inky. So this is going to take your ink really nicely. Now I'm going to share some of my favorite colors to create some really awesome blended backgrounds for your cards. So here are the two backgrounds we're going to create. I'll show how to create a really awesome galaxy background, and then how to create a nighttime kind of sky for your critters and images you want to add on top. Starting off with the galaxy background, I'm going to use my Stargazer stencil. I just love all these little stars in here. And then I'm going to grab some transparent gloss texture paste. And this is a little bit different than the one we just used. This one's actually going to resist the ink that we put down. So I'll pull out my palette knife again, and you'll notice that I don't really tape down my stencils when I'm applying the texture paste. I kind of put it on a little bit messy, so it doesn't really matter if the stencil shifts. You just want to hold it down right here. And then I'm going to just apply a thin layer of this texture paste right through my stencil. And for this one, I'll try to hit most of the stencil, but if some areas don't get completely covered, that's totally fine. And then once I'm done, I'll just take my palette knife and run it right over the top of the whole stencil to make sure that everything's really evenly covered there. Then I'll peel this right off. You can see that really awesome star background that we've created there. You're going to want to let your texture paste dry, and as that's drying, again, I want to make sure that I clean up all of my texture paste that's on the surface and on my stencil as well. Then to create the galaxy background, I like to go in with some of the darker colors to create a really awesome blend. So I'll go in with Remember Me. This is that nice dark blue. And as I add this on, you can see that that texture paste really resists that ink really nicely. You could totally do this technique with embossing powder as well, but I love how the texture paste adds a little bit more of a raised texture to the surface and creates that really awesome resist. I'll also bring just a little bit of overzealous into here. I like to go in with some of the brighter colors as well to blend this background together and give it some little pops of color here and there. And then I'll take Triple Berry too. This is one of my favorite colors. It's a really nice, vibrant purple color, and that's going to blend beautifully with these green and blue colors together to create that awesome galaxy background. Then to finish this off, I like to go in with Over the Moon, and this is just a really bright yellow color. It's one of the more light colors in the palette, but if you put it over top of other colors, it just kind of brightens them up and creates a really awesome, cheerful look for your card. So to finish off my galaxy background, I love to go in with this Over the Moon color and put it over top of some of the others to kind of blend them all out and create that really awesome look. So here's that finished galaxy background. I love how it turned out, and using some of those darker colors mixed with the brighter colors from the palette creates a really awesome blended background. To create my nighttime scene, I'm going to grab a piece of tape to mask this area off. I'll tape off the bottom section, and here we'll add a little landscape for some critters to sit on. So I'm going to use some Later Gator ink. This is my darker green from the palette. I'll apply that right along the edge there, and that's going to create a little bit of shading for my grass. And then I'll go back in with Overzealous, that nice bright green color, and I'll just blend those two out. That would create some really awesome shading in our background, and I'll kind of fade it down to that white area down there, so you don't need to fill out the whole thing with color. Once I have that blended, I can easily peel off my tape. I'll just spray that down with some water to clean off the tape, and my inks clean really nicely off of these non-porous surfaces. So if you want to wipe it off the tape and keep reusing this piece, you totally can. Then I'll flip that over, and I'm going to tape right over top of that grass area to mask it off, to protect it from where we're going to ink on the top here. And then I'm going to start off with some Over the Moon. I'm going to go in with this really light yellow color here. I'll start inking from the bottom. Now I'll bring in my lighter gray color, and this one is called Woof, and it's named after my other dog. So I'm going to grab a little bit of ink on my sponge, and I'm just going to bring it into the top area. And if you want to kind of darken up your colors, I'm going to do that right from the top to create a little bit more contrast against that blue. And that'll create a really beautiful nighttime sky sunset. So I'll pull off the tape, and you can see that really awesome masked background that we have with the grass on the bottom and that really awesome nighttime sky there. So then all you need to do is add a critter to your card, and it's really nice and finished off there. Alright, so that was teaching you how to create some really awesome blended backgrounds and some of my favorite color combinations from my new line of Simon Hurley Create inks. I hope you guys really enjoyed that, and I cannot wait to see what you create and post in the gallery. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more from Scrapbook.com, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a message. Happiness is life handmade.